the big story for at least some media outlets, the Attorney General, Eric Holder, testifying before the Senate Judiciary Committee today on Operation Fast and Furious. Now, I say for some media outlets, I notice our friend Mary Chastain at Big Journalism pointing out that NBC decided this really wasn't a newsworthy story, but Katie Pavlich from townhall.com is in studio. You consider this to be a newsworthy story.
I definitely consider this to be a newsworthy story. I've been waiting to finally hear Eric Holder try to explain not only his timeline of testimony, but the timeline of Lanny Brewer and other testimony given by ATF management throughout this investigation since probably April.
Well, if you were looking forward to hearing that explanation, you probably walked away disappointed then, didn't you? Because we really didn't hear much of an explanation.
I guess I didn't think I was going to hear it, but I was more interested in hearing how he would stammer through trying to explain it, I guess you would say.
Yeah, and you know, just to kind of sum up, and you're going to hear a lot of the testimony and the questions that the Attorney General faced on this program tonight, but really, I mean, he said he refused to admit to any mistakes.
Right. They asked him specifically, as Attorney General, what mistakes did you make during this process? And he said, I think I actually handled it very well.
What a good boy am I.
Right.
Refused to apologize to the Terry family for the death of Border Patrol agent Brian Terry. Said it was regretful, but it was, again, given the opportunity to address the Terry family, you know, and didn't do it.
Well, and we need to point out, too, that admission came actually at the end of the testimony. At the beginning of the testimony, in his opening statement, he said that he's done everything he can and made sure that families know that he's going to do everything to get families affected by border violence justice. Well, tell that to the Terry family, Mr. Holder. And then you go back, you know, you go through the testimony, and later, like you just said, you know, after Eric Holder is claiming that he's doing everything he can to bring justice to these families, we find out that he hasn't even called the Terry family. He hasn't given them a phone call. So for him to act like he's parading around trying to get justice for these families who have lost loved ones, and specifically Brian Terry's family, when this was a government operation, this wasn't necessarily just drug violence in Mexico. For him to act like he's really taking the lead on that is dishonest in itself, because he's not.
Yeah, yeah. And then we heard the Attorney General say that really what we need is more gun control laws.
And Dianne Feinstein backed it right up, and so did Chuck Schumer. And they played the whole blame Bush thing. And, you know, Chuck Schumer was trying to act like everything was completely the same under President Bush when it really wasn't. There were very distinct differences, which you have talked about multiple times on your show. And so I just find it interesting that the solution, once again, to a agency who has poor policies is not to give them consequences for their actions, but to give them even more power and to take less power, or to take more power away from the people and empower these corrupt government officials instead.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. You know, you can have whatever gun laws you want on the books,
right?
But if you knowingly allow those laws to be broken so that you can put guns in the hands of cartel members down in Mexico,
right,
it's not really going to matter.
Right. My whole thing has always been through this process, you know, if you really want to stop trafficking of guns into Mexico from America, get rid of ATF and DOJ, because they are the #1 supplier of American guns to the Mexican drug cartels at this point.
All right. You know what? We've got, again, a lot of clips from today's coverage. Why don't we get started here? We're just going to do this chronologically. Katie's going to be with us in studio for the hour as we try to get through as much of this as we can this hour. We'll be sharing more coverage throughout the evening, but let's start with a portion of Eric Holder's opening statement. Now, these are his pre-prepared remarks. He's not being questioned by anybody. This is what he brought to the table at today's hearing before the Senate Judiciary Committee.
I'd like to take a moment to address the public safety crisis of guns flowing across our border into Mexico and the local law enforcement operation known as Fast and Furious that has brought renewed public attention to this shared national security threat. Now, I want to be very clear. Any instance of so-called gun walking is simply unacceptable. Regrettably, this tactic was used as part of Fast and Furious, which was launched to combat gun trafficking and violence on our southwest border. This operation was flawed in its concept and flawed in its execution. And unfortunately, we will feel the effects for years to come, as guns that were lost during this operation continue to show up at crime scenes both here and in Mexico. This should never have happened, and it must never happen again. To ensure that it will not, and after learning about the allegations raised by ATF agents involved with Fast and Furious, I took action. I asked the department's Inspector General to investigate this matter, and I ordered that a directive be sent to the department's law enforcement agents and prosecutors stating that such tactics violate department policy and will not be tolerated. More recently, the new leadership at ATF has implemented reforms to prevent such tactics from being used in the future, including stricter oversight procedures for all significant investigations.
All right, let's stop there for a second if we can. All right, so it was flawed, it was regrettable, never ever going to happen again. Steps have been taken to ensure that. Now, you go back to this defense that the Obama administration is putting forth, that this is all Bush's fault.
Right. Or a local operation.
Or a local operation, depending on what day.
Right.
And, they test the direction of the wind, I guess, to see which way they want to direct the spin. But you go back to 2007, go back to that other operation, that Operation Wide Receiver, and apparently you've got the U.S. attorney at the time saying he has moral objections to the idea of letting guns walk. You also have, apparently, again, this notification of Mexican law enforcement, including a briefing to the Mexican Attorney General, none of which occurred in Operation Fast and Furious. I guess, my first question, and I don't know if this was asked of the Attorney General, but, he says we took steps to make sure this never happened again. Well, it shouldn't have been happening in the first place. Where was the oversight to begin with?
Right, there was a warning before this happened. I mean, it was not only did they have a warning from Operation Wide Receiver, which included help from the Mexican government and included a much smaller amount of guns being walked and tracing mechanism actually being used to trace those guns through Wide Receiver. And even that was a really bad idea. But what did they do? They decided that instead they were going to multiply the program, get rid of the Mexican government involvement, get rid of the tracing measures, and then multiply the amount of weapons from 300 to 2,000. Mm-hmm. I mean, for him to act like they've doubled down and that oversight measures are going to be put in place now, they should have been put in place, like you just said, beforehand. And that just goes back to the question of why were they doing this? Why were they doing this? Every hearing, last week Lanny Brewer, said he wanted essentially a national reporting measure for firearms. We heard it today during testimony, Eric Holder calling for more gun control. I mean, why did they think that it was a good idea after there were warning signs under the Bush administration not to let guns walk under any circumstances, whether the Mexican government knew about it or whether tracing mechanisms were being used? Why would they want to do something like this, especially when moral obligations come into play?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I want to point out too before we move on.
Yeah.
Eric Holder admitted today that guns were being allowed to walk, right? Well, has he told William Newell that? He's told Bill Newell that, the ATF Phoenix field director at the time, because he was admitting in his testimony in July that they never let guns walk, which we both know is not true because maps show it, memos show it, that guns were, being allowed to walk. So Eric Holder really needs to let these people know, if you guys are going to continue this circus of which testimony is true or not, you need to get on the same page here, because Bill Newell thinks that you weren't, is willing to say under oath that guns weren't being walked. And he even said he would do the operation again. You have the Attorney General today saying that he wouldn't do it again. So there's a lot of miscommunication going on between, ATF management and DOJ on this issue.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. And by the way, we have a rule here when we're listening to these sound bites. We like to let the subject speak. But if you ever want to make a rebuttal, if you ever want to make a point, just start talking. We'll stop the tape.
Okay.
All right. I don't want to, because I know you're sitting there kind of holding your, I got to remember all this stuff. No, just interrupt.
It's just rage cam. It's okay.
Interrupt whenever you want. All right. Back to more from Attorney General Eric Holder's opening statement before the Senate Judiciary Committee today.
Now, today, I'd like to correct some of the inaccurate and, frankly, some of the irresponsible accusations surrounding Fast and Furious. Some of the overheated rhetoric might lead you to believe that this local, Arizona-based operation was somehow the cause of the epidemic of gun violence in Mexico. In fact, Fast and Furious was a flawed response to, and not the cause of, the flow of illegal guns from the United States into Mexico. As you all know, the trafficking of firearms across our southwest border has long been a serious problem, one that has contributed to the approximately 40,000 deaths in Mexico in the last 5 years. as Senator Feinstein highlighted last week, of the nearly 94,000 guns that have been recovered and have been traced in Mexico in recent years, over 64,000 of those guns were sourced to the United States of America. 64,000 of 94,000 guns sourced to this country. The mistakes of Operation Fast and Furious, serious though they were, should not deter or distract us from our critical mission to
Don't know what happened
bombs along our southwest border.
All right, so here we have the first attempt at saying the bigger problem is gun control. We need more gun control laws.
Right, and this is something he cited Dianne Feinstein from her hearing last week with Lanny Brewer on this, and she was wrong then, and he was wrong to cite her today. Those statistics have been found false multiple times, and if you ask Darrell Issa, the chairman of the House Oversight Committee, he'll tell you that Mexico also likes to claim that the majority of guns in Mexico come from the United States. However, they don't let us look at their stockpiles. They don't let us go in and really count and trace back those weapons. So these statistics have been proven wrong multiple times by bipartisan groups like PolitiFact, FactCheck.org, the NRA. I mean, the idea that they're still trying to push these false numbers into statistics is unbelievable to me. It's grasping at straws.
Well, I mean, it goes back all the way to 2009 when we heard the 90% figure. Right. 90% of the guns recovered in Mexico and traced to the United States. And then when we proved that wrong, they came back a few months later with, would you believe 80%? Right. No, we proved that wrong, and now it was down to 70%. Now I think it's down to 66% or 60%. So, they keep walking the number down, I guess, hoping that it's going to be more believable at some point. The bottom line is, as you point out, there are problems with how Mexico traces these guns. One of the things that I think everybody who looks at this with an open mind should be curious about is how much of this can be accounted to the corrupt police, the corrupt military in Mexico, who may be placing legal orders, through the proper channels and then turning around and distributing these guns to the cartels.
Right, and a lot of these guns, I'm sure, come from our own State Department because Mexico is an ally of ours. So, of course, there's going to be guns that are coming from the United States into Mexico, but the bottom line is that the number is inflated. It's been inflated since 2009. It goes back to the question of, what was the purpose of Fast and Furious? We have internal emails from the summer showing that they wanted to push a long gun rifle reporting measure. They got that implemented in August of this year. And I like to, today, I don't know if we have the clip for later, but Attorney General Eric Holder had the nerve. They've been pulling the blame Bush card. Well, he had the nerve to blame the House Republicans for not funding tough gun control measures, and that is why there's a problem with an ATF, and that is why there's a problem with gun trafficking. Even though Operation Fast and Furious has been going on since 2009 when they had a supermajority in the House and the Senate.
Wow. All right, let's listen to more from the Attorney General.
I have supported a number of aggressive, innovative steps to do so, and our work has yielded significant successes. We've built crime-fighting capacity on both sides of the border by developing new procedures for using evidence gathered in Mexico to prosecute gun traffickers in U.S. courts, by training thousands of Mexican prosecutors and investigators, by successfully fighting to enhance sentencing guidelines for convicted traffickers and straw purchasers, and by pursuing coordinated multi-district investigations of gun trafficking rings. This year alone, we have led successful investigations into the murders of U.S. citizens in Mexico, created new cartel-fighting prosecutorial units, and secured the extradition of 104 defendants wanted by U.S. law enforcement, including the former head of the Tijuana cartel. Now, this work has undoubtedly saved and improved lives in the United States as well as in Mexico. And I am personally...
Basically, there were lots of times where we didn't let the guns go across the border and end up in the hands of the cartels. I mean, that's sort of, what we're seeing here from Holder, the litany of other, distractions.
Right. Well, I like how he tries to pull the... Once again, we're working with Mexico. We're working to prosecute these straw purchasers. Straw purchaser prosecutions under the Obama administration are virtually at zero. They aren't prosecuting anyone for buying these guns. And you know why? Because they've been on the payroll. A lot of these informants who are working through Operation Fast and Furious were FBI informants. They are paid by the U.S. government to do so. You're not going to prosecute someone who's getting paid to help you with your operation. Not to mention, those, if they start prosecuting those people, they're going to start opening their mouth and talk about what really happened during this operation. And they don't want that to happen either. But one point that I forgot to bring up in the clip before is that Eric Holder once again tried to pin this on a local Arizona operation, right?
Right.
Well, at the end of his testimony, Senator John Cornyn of Texas asked him, you're claiming that this is a local operation. And then Attorney General Eric Holder said, well, no, it's a federal operation. And he said, well, you just said in your opening statement that it was a local operation, so which one is it? And he totally bungled that answer, and he couldn't give one. And that goes back to what we've been hearing all along, is this is a local operation. Nobody in Washington, D.C. knew, even though the evidence proves that it's there. So, we're back to the arguments that were made initially in this process, because they have nothing left to go on. They really do not.
Right. Right. All right. Well, we've got a couple more minutes here of Holder's opening testimony, and then we'll take a break. Let's go back and listen to more of the Attorney General.
Committed to combating gun trafficking and reducing the alarming rate of violence along the southwest border by using effective and appropriate tools. Now, like each of you, I want to know why and how the firearms that should have been under surveillance could wind up in the hands of the Mexican drug cartels. But beyond identifying where errors occurred and ensuring that they never occur again, we must be careful not to lose sight of the critical problem that this flawed investigation has highlighted. We are losing the battle to stop the flow of illegal guns to Mexico. This means, I believe, that we have a responsibility to act. And we can start by listening to the agents, the very agents who serve on the front lines of this battle and who testified here in Congress. Not only did they bring the inappropriate and misguided tactics of Operation Fast and Furious to light, they also sounded the alarm to Congress that they need our help. ATF agents who testified before a House committee this summer explained that the agency's ability to stem the flow of guns from the United States into Mexico suffers from a lack of effective enforcement tools. One critical first step should be for congressional leaders to work with us to provide ATF with the resources and the statutory tools it needs to be effective.
Another would be... Let's stop there. Yeah, okay, so we know that we did unpardonable things. We know that we did, regretful things. Give us more authority. Give us more money. Give us more power. Give us, more.
Well, and what I got out of that clip of his testimony is, so now Attorney General Eric Holder is interested in what the whistleblowers have to say?
Yeah.
It's the same guys who have been, holding on to their jobs for fear of retaliation, the same guys who have been retaliated against for coming forward with corruption within ATF, exposing this whole thing. He's giving them credit all of a sudden. He should, but they've been the ones who've been thrown under the bus from the beginning and told that they really had no idea what they were talking about. Remember that? So for him to come out today and say, oh, well, the whistleblowers are the ones telling us all of this and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, they have been for a long time, and you're the one who wasn't listening to them, and they've been retaliated against within your own agency, so much so that Chairman Issa had to send a letter to DOJ and ATF telling you not to do it.
Right.
I mean, for him to come out now and say, oh, well, the whistleblowers are taking really seriously. He should have been backing the whistleblowers since the beginning. I mean, there's a reason why they have the No Fear Act in the Justice Department, right?
Yeah.
There's a reason why we had the Whistleblower Act of 1989. There's a reason why Chairman Issa had to introduce new legislation to reinforce the legislation from 1989, because clearly it's not working within DOJ and ATF.
No, as a matter of fact, NPR, which has been late to the story, but I'll give them credit for this. This evening, they released a story that Dennis Burke, the U.S. attorney who resigned in Phoenix, admits now to leaking a letter in an attempt to discredit one of the whistleblowers, John Dodson. Interestingly enough, the attorneys for Dodson say, while we appreciate Dennis Burke, admitting that he did this, he wasn't the only one. Mm-mm. It wasn't just Dennis Burke who did this. So it looks like now you've got another attempt at somebody trying to be the fall guy.
Yep.
As we learn more and more about these leaks, and that's something very important because in Holder's testimony he talks about the need to get beyond the partisan political witch hunts.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's exactly what this administration has been engaging in for months now when it comes
Right.
to Fast and Furious.
Well, the only reason it's partisan is because this entire operation was partisan from the beginning. When it was implemented, their goal was, we had an agenda from the beginning. And, on the Dennis Burke thing, let's not forget that he was Janet Napolitano's chief of staff from 2001 until 2007, until she was tapped as Homeland Security Secretary.
Mm-hmm.
And Eric Holder made an interesting point today about that exact leaked memo, and he said, Senator Grassley asked him what's being done about that, and the fact that this memo was leaked. And Eric Holder said, well, my inspector general is looking into that, which is a complete joke because the inspector general has also been leaking material. So for the inspector
Right.
general to be taking memo and information leaks seriously, that's just not happening because that person is the one who is leaking information.
Absolutely. All right, listen, it's 21 after the hour. Why don't we take a quick time out? We've heard most of the opening statement from Eric Holder, so when we come back, you'll get to hear some questions from Senator Dianne Feinstein. I'm sure it's going to be a real grilling of the Attorney General with the senator from California asking the questions. Well, we're joined by Katie Pavlich from townhall.com in studio. But, Katie, I think we're just going to go ahead and wrap this up early here. Dana Milbank of the Washington Post is out with a new column. He says this political scandal is going nowhere fast. So, I guess if Milbank says there's no story,
Yeah.
we'll just
No
move on.
story.
We'll
Let's
talk
just-
about something else.
Let's ignore it. We'll go talk about something else, like you said.
Yeah. No. Sorry, Mr. Milbank.
Not happening.
And again, I'm shocked that Dana Milbank would write in the Washington Post that there is no there here. He says, and I love this, he talks about an exchange between Senator Cornyn and Eric Holder about a letter that had false information that was sent to Congress. And Holder says, well, what I said is it contains inaccurate information.
Right.
And Cornyn says, well, isn't that false? And he said, quote, false, I think, implies people making a decision to deceive. God, I wish I had that language in high school. I could have aced all of my I wasn't trying to deceive you.
I just got
I was
an
just
inaccurate
inaccurate.
answer on the math test.
But you
Not
said it was false.
right.
Exactly.
It's just inaccurate, not false. No,
I mean, Dean's List.
Right,
Man.
right. No, the bottom line is that letter that they're referring to was one given to Senator Grassley by Lanny Brewer in response to some information he requested about Operation Fast and Furious and when he knew about it and whether and whether he had the opportunity to stop it. And Lanny Brewer gave him false information, which we know now. And it's not a matter of Eric Holder saying it was inaccurate. The entire thing from the beginning in this process has been they've deceived every step of the way. And this letter is no different.
Yeah.
They wrote that letter in deception. They did not write it inaccurately. That is a fact. There's no question about that.
It's amazing. I mean, with Clinton, we had a new definition of what was. And now with the Attorney General, we have a new definition of what false is.
Right.
Wow.
False or accurate or right.
I always learn so much from these things. All right. So we shared with you a little bit of Eric Holder's opening statement in the last segment. Continuing on with our coverage of this, we've got a cut here of Senator Feinstein, who you will remember when Assistant Attorney General Lanny Brewer was testifying last week, was praised by Lanny Brewer for all of her incredible work in restricting your rights. And she, of course, went right along with it. So how did the senator handle the Attorney General today? Well, let's take a listen.
If I may, I'd like to put in the record the official firearms trace data from the Department of Justice from 12/1/2006 to 9/30/2011. This is on guns to Mexico. Thank you very much. Mr. Attorney General, welcome. You mentioned that you became aware of Fast and Furious in 2011. You spoke to us about the Grassley letters in the end of January and February. You asked the IG to investigate in April.
In February.
Oh, I beg the February, thank you. My understanding is that the practice of letting guns walk first occurred in 2006 as part of Operation Wide Receiver and again the next year as part of the Hernandez investigation. As you review the records of this, as I'm sure you would, did the attorney generals at that time, I believe there were two of them, in 2007, know about this practice, and what was done about it then?
I don't know about the knowledge that the attorneys general had.
Can we stop for a second? Attorney General Holder, look, I could ask you about this operation that took place under your watch, but there are going to be a lot of other people who ask you those types of questions. Let's talk about President Bush for a couple of minutes here.
Yeah, and Chuck Schumer did the same thing. He was pestering. At this point, I felt a little sympathy for Holder because he was pestering Holder with all these questions about the Bush administration Justice Department.
Right.
And Holder doesn't know anything about the Justice Department.
Holder doesn't know anything about his Justice Department.
He didn't work in that Justice Department. Of course, he's not going to know who any of these people are, what their roles were. Of course, he doesn't know that information. Why are you asking these questions?
Senator, I don't know what was going on in 2010.
Right.
How on earth am I supposed to know what was going on in 2007?
Exactly, but Dianne Feinstein and all her anti-gun, anti-Second Amendment glory submitted for the record the trace data from the Department of Justice, the same department that has been pumping this 90%, 70%, 60% figure that is false. So that for the record statistics, that was not accurate either.
I believe that that information is actually on its way over from the Ministry of Truth, so it'll be entered into the record here.
Right.
All right. More from Senator Feinstein and Attorney General Holder.
I don't know about the knowledge that the attorneys general had at that point. I have read reports that a memo was sent to Attorney General McCasey. I don't know what action they took, but I do know that when I saw the indications that guns had walk, I was bothered by it, offended by it, concerned about it, and I ordered the Inspector General to investigate it and also issued a directive to the field to make clear that gun walking was not appropriate, was inconsistent with Justice Department policy, and should not occur.
Do your records indicate that this operation began in 2006 and continued virtually unabated since that time?
Operation Fast and Furious began in 2009, I believe. Wide Receiver began in 2006, 2007, I'm not sure. That matter was investigated and lay fallow for some time until the criminal division in the Obama Justice Department looked at it and decided to try to bring the cases that had been just lying there.
All right, stop there for a second if we can. Because I love Senator Feinstein trying to... you'd call this leading the witness if this was in court. Isn't it true, Attorney General Holder, that this started under the Bush administration and really continued unabated right up until you put a stop to it, sir? And thankfully, to Holder's credit, he has to say, well, no, we're talking about different operations entirely.
Which I did appreciate from him, making the distinction between the two. Because
look, we say, yes, we appreciate it. It's the truth.
It is the truth.
You can't say...
But for once, he's not lying, right? Feinstein and Chuck Schumer, throughout the testimony today, that's what they're trying to do, and that's what Democrats and anti-Second Amendment people and advocates are going to do from this point forward. They're going to try and lump Wide Receiver in with Fast and Furious as much as they can and put it on the previous administration because that's been their tactic all along with every single other topic. But going back to what Eric Holder said, he said that when he first learned about gun walking, he was concerned about it. He didn't like it. And so he ordered the Inspector General to investigate it. How about ordering it to stop and then investigate what happened?
He wrote a directive saying that this was inappropriate and not standard with Justice
right.
Department guidelines.
So it continued for a long time. How about ordering a stop to it if you think that there's a problem rather than telling your Inspector General to investigate it? I mean, really? How about you stop it first and then ask questions about it?
Yeah, I'm wondering. You hear the language. I was concerned. I was upset. I was bothered by it. I was bothered, offended, and concerned by this. Well, did you talk to anybody besides the Inspector General? I mean, did you ever call up the U.S. Attorney in Arizona and say, "Hey, Dennis, what the heck is going on down there?"
Right. What are you doing?
Right. I get the sense that the answer is no.
Right.
That he passed it off to the let the Inspector General handle this.
Unless he already knew what was going on.
Oh.
And then he didn't need to call Dennis Burke in Arizona because he was briefed on it. But
I-
that information is still forthcoming.
I
so.
hadn't considered that possibility. All right, more from Senator Feinstein and Attorney General Holder.
Thank you very much.
Yes, Senator.
Since July of this year, the ATF has instituted a requirement that federal firearms licensees in the 4 states that border Mexico, California, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas, report whenever a single purchaser buys multiple, meaning 2 or more, assault rifles within a 5-day period. I pulled the Federal Register and looked at that, and it says that federal firearms licensees must report multiple sales or other dispositions whenever the licensee sells or otherwise disposes of 2 or more rifles with the following characteristics: A, semi-automatic; B, a caliber greater than 22; C, the ability to accept a detachable magazine to the same person at one time or during any 5 consecutive business days. This requirement will apply only to federal firearm licensees who are dealers and or pawnbrokers in Arizona, California, New Mexico, and Texas. Can you tell us a little bit about how that section has functioned, whether it is being carried out, if there are lapses, or if you believe it can be strengthened in any way?
I think that regulation requirement is an extremely reasonable one. It has all of the features that you have described, and I think significantly is totally consistent. It is exactly what we have been doing for years with regard to the sale of handguns.
Stop. Stop. Oh, okay. This is the regulation that the NRA is sued over because they don't have the authority.
And the notion that somehow...
Hey, Mr. Attorney General, I'll let you talk. Just hang on a second.
Your turn in just a minute.
That's
Hang
right.
on.
You had all day. Anyway, this is the provision that the administration decided to enact via regulation when Congress didn't want to go along with their gun control plan. Now, the problem for the administration is that the Gun Control Act of 1968 doesn't give the executive branch the authority
Thank God.
to call for these new regulations. The GCA specifically said multiple sales of handguns should be reported to the BATFE. But it didn't say anything about, oh, and by the way, if you want to go ahead and, say, long gun sales too, go right ahead. In fact, Congress, again, they had the opportunity to put that in law, and they said no.
Right, and so a new poll came out 2 weeks ago showing that Americans aren't interested in assault rifle bans either, or reporting measures for that either. But the bottom line is, law-abiding gun shop owners and workers were uncomfortable with selling massive amounts of long AK-47s, 50 caliber rifles to these known straw purchasers in the first place. I mean, why do you need another reporting measure when these people were calling ATF and saying, I'm not really comfortable selling to this person. I know you told me that I should, but it's I'm really not comfortable doing it.
Right.
And ATF said, go right ahead. So for them to act like some reporting measure is going to make any difference whatsoever when, the gun shops are already doing what they're supposed to by reporting suspicious behavior is absolutely outrageous. I mean, do you really think, Feinstein, Miss Feinstein, Senator, do you really think that giving ATF more authority to control what these people are doing when they're already doing what they're told and then getting thrown under the bus for it is a good idea?
Right.
We don't, and Americans don't, and Congress doesn't either.
Well, absolutely right. And, again, what you heard from the Attorney General today is that the ATF needs more. They need more resources. They need more power. They need more authority.
Right.
What they're getting is more paperwork. I mean, every time a father walks into a gun store and buys a rifle for himself and then a rifle for his son to go out for hunting season, that's being sent up to the ATF now, and these ATF agents are having to go track this down and make sure he's not selling them to the cartels.
Right.
You're burdening these agents with paperwork that, again, the vast majority of which I think even the Attorney General would say is not going to be indicative of sales to straw purchasers or cartel members.
Well, yeah.
What we've seen, as you said, are these FFLs voluntarily picking up the phone and saying, hey, I got a guy here who wants to buy a ton of guns. I'm not comfortable with that. What do you think? And he's being told, oh, yeah, no, go ahead,
Right.
sell them. It's fine.
Right.
We got you covered.
Yeah, I know. It's just, it is so mind-boggling to think that it's people like Dianne Feinstein, she's one person, but in the situation of Operation Fast and Furious and the DOJ officials and the ATF management officials, not the field agents who were behind this entire thing, they're the ones who are giving cartel members, violent criminals, lots of high-powered guns and then getting them lost in Mexico, are more concerned about controlling the everyday lives of law-abiding citizens with a Second Amendment right than they are concerned about drug cartels. They are clearly not concerned about trafficking guns to Mexico and them falling into the hands of cartel members because they were giving them to them. They were the ones doing that. So for them to be more concerned with, like you said, a father going into a gun shop and buying 2 rifles for hunting season, for them to be more concerned about that than cartel members coming in and getting guns, that's the really scary part about this entire thing.
Yeah, no kidding.
Is that's where their priorities are right now.
Sitting in with Katie Pavlich in studio tonight talking about Attorney General Eric Holder's testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee. Now, we're going to skip ahead a little bit. We'll come back to Senator Schumer. I hate to make you and Katie sit through, a couple of the suck-up questions. I want to hear a little bit
What's
of
your
the...
favorite color, Eric Holder? What do you like to eat for breakfast?
What was your name of your dog when you were growing up? Anyway, there were actually some tough questions directed towards the Attorney General, including Senator John Cornyn from Texas. So we can start with Cut 4. We'll come back to Cut 3 and Senator Schumer here. But I want to hear, frankly, I want to hear somebody grill the Attorney General about what happened. So let's listen in on the questioning between the Senator from Texas and the Attorney General.
Mr. Chairman, for what it's worth, I agree with Senator Schumer that we need all the information about these programs and the distinctions, if any, between wide receiver and Fast and Furious. General Holder, I note that Fast and Furious has had a significant spillover effect in my state of Texas, where 119 of these weapons, of the 2,000 weapons that were walked into the hands of the cartels, 119 of them have shown up at crime scenes in my state. Investigations by Senator Grassley have also revealed that the ATF agents have ordered clerks at Houston-based business called Carter's Country to go through with sales of weapons to suspicious purchasers, some of which may have been working as agents of the cartels. On August the 7th, I sent you a letter asking you about the Texas connections, and I got a letter back last Friday from your subordinate saying that you were unable to provide more information at this time. I'm hopeful you will be able to provide more information because we know that the weapons from Fast and Furious have shown up at 11 different crime scenes in the United States. And this is far from, as you stated earlier, a local law enforcement operation in terms of its impact. Many of these weapons, of course, ended up in Mexico. One, we know at the death at the crime scene where Brian Terry was murdered by the cartels. But let me ask you a little bit about some of this timeline. First of all, on February the 4th, Assistant Attorney General Weiss wrote a letter denying gun walking, and it wasn't until November 1st of 2011 when Lanny Brewer testified that letter was false, that throughout that whole period from February the 4th, 2011 and November the 1st, 2011, your department left the impression on Congress that the allegation that the department had engaged in gun walking operations was false, when in fact Mr. Brewer came in on November the 1st, 2011, said that letter sent to Senator Grassley in response to his inquiry, that letter was false. How do you account for the fact that the department had, for the period of time from February 2011 till November 2011, had misled Congress about the accuracy of that allegation?
Well, I think there's some validity in the concern that you raise. As I indicated before, with regard to
I do too.
Well, I hope so. Yeah, your question, so I assume you did. February the 4th, the information that was contained in that letter was thought to be accurate. It wasn't until sometime after that that we had a sense that the information was not, in fact, accurate. So it wasn't as if the date upon which we knew the information was inaccurate was on February the 4th. It comes sometime after that. I received things as late as March of 2011 from people at ATF who assured me that gun walking did not occur.
But your department, you said you learned about Fast and Furious. On May the 3rd, you said you learned probably over the last few weeks. Today you say it was over the last couple of months.
Well, I say over the last few weeks, or it could be expressed as over the last couple of months. I think the last few weeks, as I said, is consistent with the timeline that you have up there.
But the fact is, the department's official response to Senator Grassley as part of his investigation was that it didn't happen until you came before the House and said that you learned about it over the last few weeks. That was May the 3rd, 2011. Is that correct?
I'm not sure I understand that question.
Okay, well, let me go on to something else. Do you still contend this is a local law enforcement operation?
No, it's a federal. Oh, no, don't misinterpret that. It's a federal law enforcement.
Those are your words. You said it was a local law enforcement operation.
Well, then that's my
in your
fault.
Opening testimony.
No, that's my fault. It's a federal law
Oh my gosh!
enforcement
Hang on one
operation.
second. We actually heard Eric Holder say something was his fault. I just thought we should go ahead and note that because
Was that false or accurate?
I
'Cause
think that was
I'm not
probably
sure.
the only time today that
Yeah.
happened, right?
Was that false or accurate? I'm not sure about that.
All right, sorry. Hate to interrupt the Attorney General.
Enforcement operation that was concerned, that was of local concern. It was not a national operation.
Well,
was
it
a local
metastasized,
concern.
didn't it, to Mexico? It metastasized to Texas and obviously in Arizona, so it wasn't certainly local in effect. You would agree with that?
Oh, as I indicated in my opening statement, the impact of the mistakes made in Fast and Furious are going to be felt in Mexico, in the United States, and probably for years to come.
Because a lot of those guns are still have not been accounted for, correct?
Yeah, a number of those guns have not been accounted for, and that's why it is incumbent upon us, and why I've taken the steps that I've taken to try to ensure that the mistakes that happened there are not repeated.
All right, we'll stop there for a second.
The next part
while
is
they're
great.
while they're changing. Yeah.
Yeah. We can talk about it and then but the next part it was probably one of my favorite moments out of the whole thing. It just showed how accountable Eric Holder really is for this entire thing. They had a chart that outlined everyone, all the departments, and Eric Holder is at the top in charge of everything.
Every one of them.
Yep.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and watch as they put that new chart in. Go ahead and roll that footage here.
For the Department of Justice, you would agree with me that the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives is an agency in the Department of Justice of which you are head, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And that's your signature right here, attesting to this organization chart, April the 30th, 2010. So you're not suggesting, are you, General Holder, that it's not your responsibility to have known about this operation, is it?
Well, there are 115,000 employees in the United States Department of Justice. There are
And the buck stops with you.
I have ultimate responsibility for that which happens in the department, but I cannot be expected to know the details of every operation that is ongoing in the Justice Department on a day-to-day basis. I did not know about Fast and Furious, as is indicated in the chart that you now have up there, until, I guess, until it became public.
You cannot be expected to have known about the operation known as Fast and Furious, despite the fact that we know that you received an NDIC memo on July the 5th, 2010. You received another memo on Fast and Furious November the 1st, 2010, and you say you cannot be expected to have known about it because of the size of your agency?
No, there are a couple of problems with that chart, colorful though it is. The AG holder receives NDIC memo, incorrect. AG holder receives significant recent events memo. That is incorrect.
There were memos with your name on it addressed to you referring to the Fast and Furious operation. Are you just saying you didn't read them?
I didn't receive them.
You didn't receive them.
What happens is that these reports are prepared these weekly reports or whatever, they are prepared with my name on them, with the Deputy Attorney General's name on them. They are reviewed by my staff and a determination made as to what ought to be brought to my attention. If you look at those memos, there's nothing in any of those memos.
We are unfortunately, we are out of time as Eric Holder throws his staff under the bus.
Yeah.
For the second time, by the
Cornyn
way.
just nailed him to a wall, and it was great.
Well, listen, Katie, I really appreciate you coming in studio this hour. I know we'll be having you back again very soon because the story is far from over.
Far from over. We got a lot going on. So
All right. Katie
we'll keep following
Pavlich
it.
with townhall.com.